It almost feels like a glitch in the Matrix because yesterday there was absolutely no cricket match whatsoever. No international cricket matches, but you're still here at 8 a.m. at Wake Up Cricket powered by Pavilion Picks because that doesn't stop from talking about cricketing news and things that happen around the world in cricket, which is exactly why you're here. Hit that subscribe button, get us to 500 subscribers, and let's get into it.
Well, so what do we get into since there are no matches to talk about? Well, there are schedules and there are fines. Let's get started. Afghanistan to tour India for Test and ODI series in June. Afghanistan cricket team will tour India in June for a one-off test and a three-match ODI series. The test begins on June 6 in New Chandigarh and will be only the second red ball meeting between the two sides. Indian team won their first encounter in 2018 by an innings and 262 runs in Bengaluru. This upcoming test match will not be a part of the 25-27 World Test Championship cycle and will be just the second test played in India in the month of June. The ODI leg will be historic as it marks the first bilateral 50-over series between the two teams. The matches will be played on June 14th in Dharamshala, June 17th in Lucknow, and June 20th in Chennai. Previously, they met in ODIs only at the Asia Cups and the World Cups. The series starts less than a week after the IPL final on May 31st and will be India's first assignment after the ongoing T20 World Cup. India will then head to England in July for a white ball tour, making it the start of a busy international stretch.
This it almost feels like the exciting time after the first 6 months of only T20 cricket. And I say exciting because sometimes T20 cricket can just be monotonous. And it's just this is also the start of the new series and a lot of new calendar marked series because you having Afghanistan now, you have England later, and slowly and surely a lot of matches and international tours start being marked on the calendar. But it's very interesting that we play another test match against Afghanistan because the first time around when we did play against Afghanistan, there's a lot of conversations about how this is the difference between playing a lot of test matches as a nation like India versus playing very less test matches like Afghanistan, because you just see the divide in terms of not just quality but in terms of being able to show that competitive spirit throughout 3-4 days. And I say 3-4 days because usually the match doesn't last for much longer. If you guys don't remember the first red ball, we just out batted Afghanistan completely, and I don't think we batted again. Or even if we batted again, we just did that for the fun of it because we didn't really need to. It will be interesting how Afghanistan play another red ball match against India. But yeah, historic ODI series is fun because I I want to see Afghanistan flourish in the ODI format. They are fantastic in the T20 format. They haven't yet qualified for the Super 8s and the semi-finals in the T20 World Cups, but I will want to see them do that in the ODI World Cup because as much as people talk about how the ODI World Cup is dying, it's a personal favorite of mine. I think the ODI format is beautiful in itself. It's longer. I also like the test format. Maybe that's why. But the ODI format, there's so much happening if you really think about it as a cricket fan. Yeah, I really want to see them flourish against India. And even if they beat India in the ODI format, I'd be more than happy.
Well, there's nothing much more that I want to add except for the fact that the first time Afghanistan came around, it was their first test match that they were playing. Like when they came and played against India, it was their first ever test. And I had the chance to go and watch that. It was a lot of fun.
That is true, actually. I forgot.
Well, what's not fun is being charged after your campaign and charged with fines. PCB fines the entire Pakistan squad after T20 World Cup exit. All members of Pakistan team's T20 World Cup squad have been fined PKR 5 million each by the Pakistan Cricket Board following their disappointing campaign. The fines, understood to be performance related rather than disciplinary, were imposed after Pakistan's 61-run defeat to India in the group stage. Players were informed the penalties could be waived off if the team reaches the semi-finals, but Pakistan were eliminated in the Super 8 stage, marking a fourth consecutive failure to make the last four of an ICC men's event. A washout against New Zealand and a defeat to England left Pakistan dependent on other results and a massive win over Sri Lanka, which did not materialize. Despite avoiding a third straight first round exit, the campaign fell short of expectations. There were no reported disciplinary issues within the squad. making the board's decision unusual. While the PCB has previously taken strong action after major tournament setbacks, sanctions have typically been linked to conduct rather than on field performance. One bright spot was Sahibzada Farhan, who set a new record for most runs in a single T20 World Cup and became the only player to score two centuries in the same edition. Although we are left wondering if Farhan too is getting fined PKR 5 million.
Damn, very interesting. Now, this feels like a very Pakistan cricket board thing to do. Like, I don't think anyone else in the entire world is going to be doing something like that. But it just feels like such a sad thing to happen, right? Of course, we know the state of Pakistan cricket, and there's all of the discussion around the board itself, how things are run, and then the players. There's a lot of talk about the likes of Babar Azam, even some Saeem Ayub, and even the likes of Shaheen Shah Afridi, who might now be out of the squad. There's rumors that they might get dropped from the T20 setup, from the ODI setup
Might
going
as well
forward.
be.
Might as well be. That's what Ashwin has to say. I don't know what a lot of Pakistani fans think. I think that is the general sentiment as well. But this almost feels like such a knee jerk reaction, right? Like, I'm trying to draw a parallel of this happening in a corporate job. Like, you've got your salary, and then they're basically like, hey, you haven't done well for this client, so we're going to take back this much percentage, which is not how you run a professional setup. And it also goes on to highlight so many problems that Pakistan cricket has internally. And funnily enough, it's not just the players, but it's mostly also the people on top, the people in power who are responsible for ensuring that Pakistan cricket runs a certain way. But that's definitely not the case.
Yeah, it's very funny that, I mean, it isn't surprising that it's from Pakistan cricket, the news, but it's very funny they do this because what were they expecting? I mean, you if so, when does the fine not happen? When they qualify for the Super Eights or when they get out from the semi-finals? So was Super Eights the minimum requirement from PCB, and is that when they don't get fined? I think the idea of fining players to when they don't perform is hilarious to me. I also think it's because they tried everything they possibly could to win or lose the game against Sri Lanka. I think both the teams are trying to help each other in some form. The fact that Pakistan couldn't get through even after that match, I think it's that. I think it's the even after that match, Pakistan couldn't get through.
Hmm. And now we move on to the next story, which is on Alyssa Healy and her century in a final ODI. Healy savors perfect farewell with 158 in the final ODI. Alyssa Healy admitted milestone matches have never been her favorite, but she finally allowed herself to enjoy one as she smashed 158 of 98 balls against Indian women's team in Harvard. Healy reached 179 balls and reached 150 just 16 deliveries later, briefly threatening a double century before cramps ended her innings. She finished her ODI careers with 3,777 runs at 37.02 and a strike rate above 100, lifted by one last dazzling display. With Australia cruising, she even bowled 2 overs of off spin for the first time in international cricket, drawing cheers from the crowd and light-hearted commentary from Mitchell Stark. The farewell is not over yet. Australia now head to Perth for the pink ball test at the Waka, where Healy is set to don the baggy green for one final time.
I'll tell you what, seeing her bowl the off spin gave me some hope that I'm not the worst at playing cricket. But it was very wholesome to see, first of all, an international cricketer of her stature finishing off her international career in one format. I mean, she's already retired from the T20 format, but the ODI format with a century, you don't see that very often. You see that actually very often against India. I mean, you can look back at men's cricket and think about the amount of players who have retired against India with a century, and it's quite heartbreaking. And it's not surprising that it just continues to happen in women's cricket, especially with Alyssa Healy, the kind of player that she is. When she looks back on it, I was thinking about it. Her as a player, when she looks, if it was someone else looking back on her numbers objectively, an average of 37 in the ODI format across a lot of years, I don't know if it's something, I don't know if it's the most standout number in terms of averages, but when you look at her number more deeply and then divide her career into two halves, I think she'll be very, very proud of herself in the ODI format, especially because she's been very vocal about how it's one of her most favorite formats. Of course, she loves the baggy green. Of course, that's the red ball format. But they play so much ODI cricket that you just automatically love it. You just automatically fall in love with that format. And so she's played so much of it, and for her to finish off with a century would be it's just great. And we were talking about this yesterday, and we put Megha on spot about how in the red ball format will she finish with a century. And I hope for her sake, I think it's very poetic for a cricketer to have a test century in itself, and for her to do that, especially for the kind of player that she is. I think it'll just be great, especially at Perth, where there is also a hill. So it's a stand.
Healy Hill.
Yeah, where there's a stand named after her for that game. Not a stand, it's just a hill.
It's just a hill.
Yeah, on the ground where there are no seats, but you can sit on the ground. And it's called the Haley Hill. I think it'll just be poetic for her to finish it off with a century.
I think if she comes to bowl in the test match, it'll be nice if they can put up a stat again, because the last time she did, they had a Stark versus Healy stat of how
Yeah.
much they'd run while bowling. I'd like to see the same in the test matches.
Now, moving from a story that Ashwin labeled hilarious to Healy's Hill, we talk about some hailing from Gautam Gambhir, and that's obviously concerning Sanju Samson. And we move on to the story. Sanju Samson's 97 powers India into semis as Gambhir hails team effort. Sanju Samson delivered when it mattered the most, smashing an unbeaten 97 to guide India into the T20 World Cup semi-finals, earning rich praise from head coach Gautam Gambhir. Gambhir said he never doubted Samson's quality despite a lean run before the tournament. He highlighted the control in the knock, noting that Samson relied on clean cricketing shots rather than brute force while anchoring the chase of 196 against West Indies. The coach also credited India's disciplined power play bowling, with early spells from Arshdeep Singh and Hardik Pandya and two tight overs from Akshar Patel, ensuring the game never drifted away. Dismissing talks of peaking at the right time, Gambhir said every match demands India's best. He stressed that instincts outweigh data in T20 cricket and praised the flexibility of players like Tilak Varma, while adding that Shivam Dube's late boundaries were just as vital as Samson's match winning 97. For Gambhir, it was a proof that in a team sport, every contribution counts, as if we needed more proof of that.
Exactly. I mean, Gambhir sometimes goes on to state the absolute obvious things, and then he goes on to state things that make absolutely no sense. For him to firstly say that he had the confidence in Gambhir in Samson and backed him throughout, that's not true. Let's be honest. They got in Gill midpoint. They dropped Sanju Samson, and it is very funny for him to now come out and say this. But that's something that we've come to expect over the years from Gambhir. But outside of that, I think just for him to even say the data bit is something that really annoyed a lot of us. Also, because we work with a lot of cricket data, but it's also clearly shown in some of the decisions that the Indian team has taken. Funnily enough, I think the game against West Indies was one of those where, in fact, a lot of the matchups and a lot of the decisions that were made were purely on the basis of the fact that the data showed as such. Now, for Gambhir, I still think it's easy to say this, because when you have a team where nearly every player is the best in the world for their department, only certain things can go wrong, and the data
True.
improvement there can be very minute. But I just think it's a bit brash and unnecessary for him to say that. Having said all of that, I still agree with the point that he makes on the team contributions and everything, because even, for example, there was a point where India was struggling and we needed a couple of boundaries towards the end, and Dube came in and gave us that impetus. Also, something that we'll get to a little later. But those two boundaries were equally important. Of course, Samson's knock takes the major chunk of the cake itself. But yeah, you can't fault Gambhir for wanting to praise the entire team. And it's nice in a way that kind of holds the team together and holds every individual in the team as an equal, which is important to win a big World Cup, because you have that sort of camaraderie that is built. Something we saw in the 23 World Cup, and unfortunately we fell short in the final. But maybe this time we go all the way.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes, I'm not sometimes, I think Gambhir takes himself too seriously. I feel like everything he says, he thinks he's quoting something important.
Well, moving on to another important story, and that's on South Africa. Unbeaten South Africa embrace favorite stag ahead of semi-final. South Africa team are no longer hiding from expectations as the only unbeaten side of the T20 World Cup, with commanding wins over India and semi-final opponents New Zealand. They are ready to accept that this tournament could be theirs to lose. Head coach Shukri Conrad says playing as favourites is a position his side have earned. Rather than downplaying their chances, he believes pressure is something to embrace and not fear. Having already guided South Africa to the World Test Championship title, Conrad brings a calm belief that big moments should be enjoyed first and managed second. Their campaign has not been without tension. A dramatic double super over win against Afghanistan in the group stage could easily have derailed them, but instead strengthened the squad's resolve. Kagiso Rabada, Tristan Stubbs, and Keshav Maharaj all stood up in defining moments, reinforcing the sense that different players can deliver under stress. With a seam-heavy attack led by Rabada, Marco Jansen, and Lungi Ngidi, and a batting unit that has recovered from early setbacks more than once, South Africa have combined aggression with composure. Now they head to Kolkata for the semi-final, believing expectation is not a burden, but a sign that they're doing something right.
Unfortunately for South Africa, if they don't win the World Cup, the tag of being a choker will just continue. For them, there's no winning from here unless they win, which is so unfortunate because they have been the top side in this World Cup. They have been the best side in this World Cup. And yes, they are favorites to win the World Cup. But because of the history and because of how they've done at World Cups and because of how they've lost, the tag of being a choker will just continue. It will just heighten up if they lose in the semi-final or the final, because now it's the knockouts. So if you lose one game, they'll be like, right, so they win all the games when it finally mattered, they couldn't win, and so they choked once again. But talking about South Africa, as I said, right, everyone's contributed. We were just talking about team contribution and players stepping up. For them, it almost felt like a player stepped up in each of the game, in the bowling department and the batting department. And that's exactly what you need in a World Cup. That's what you need at a tournament, which is also why in the semi-final or the final, if one of them don't step up and if South Africa lose, them being a choker might just continue. But to be fair, them winning the WTC final last year and them finally winning an accolade, to be fair, they won the Champions Trophy. But them winning an accolade would have just cemented some confidence in them. So for them to win this T20 World Cup as well would do something. I feel like if they win this T20 World Cup, there'll be a whole wall broken down in terms of being a choker and not being able to win World Cups. And then you have the ODI World Cup. And so
I think the WTC final was huge for them, right? For them to be able to go all the way there and under Shukri Conrad once again, because they've been on a bit of a golden run since then. They came to India, they kind of beat India in that test series as well. And of course, this is a different format, but you can see the confidence translating, although there are only a few players that overlap, but that spreads kind of across the group and across the formats, which is what we are seeing very greatly now. They seem to have a lot of plans in place.
And another interesting aspect of this being that they somehow do not do well in bilaterals where there's relatively less pressure and they step up at the World Cups. And we've seen that happening across T20 World Cups now, at least in one format. Moving on to the meme for the day, and obviously the guys gave the cue to it. It features Shivam Dubey and it features his heroics. Let's go ahead.
Barges in, hits boundary from first ball, refuses to explain further. Now, I know a lot of CSK fans are going to be jumping not only at what Shivam Dubey has been doing this T20 World Cup, but also what Sanju Samson did that night. I think there is a common consensus that for players who are struggling in their careers, as soon as they join CSK, we also have yellow here for CSK. They seem to just be able to revive their careers in some way, shape, or form. And of course, there's a Dhoni factor to that. I think Dhoni helps kind of identify. Even in fact, with Dubey, that was the case.
That is true.
That's where they sort of realized that he is someone who can come in the middle overs and bash spin. That was discovered at his time in CSK. And so I'm not surprised to see that meme, typical CSK meme that you would see. And now you expect the same with Samson. He's already given the Chennai crowd a bit of a preview. He's already done well at the Eden Gardens in that crazy knock. And I think a lot of fans are a lot more excited to now see him come to Chennai Super Kings.
The context to this meme is the fact that Shivam Dubey has a lot of underrated knocks leading up to the World Cup and even in the World Cup. And a lot of people don't really talk about him because there are star players around him that do perform. And that's the context where he does his job and doesn't really take credit for it, get any credit for it. But that's the good thing, right? In a team sport where you have players contributing and you don't necessarily need to talk about, you don't necessarily need to be talked about to do well for your country. And that's exactly what Shivam Dubey has been doing. And of course, as a CSK fan, you'd only be happy because he's part of the CSK. And like Pratap said, he was almost discovered. The role that he's playing for the Indian team was almost discovered in the Chennai Super Kings. And for him to translate that in international cricket, it did take some time for him to be able to do that. But once he started doing it consistently. And then people realized it wasn't even a Dubey versus Hardik thing. You could play both of them because both of them have different kinds of style of batting and they both have different strengths. And you can use both of them because one is a lefty and one is a right-hander. And so if you have both in the team just becomes so much stronger. So it's great to see Shivam Dubey being able to do whatever he's doing. He doesn't have the aura like Hardik Pandya, like people might say, but the fact that he's able to contribute in almost every single match, good on him and good on for Team India. Now, talking about today's game, there's only one international game happening today, and that is something you have to watch. It's Sri Lankan women's versus West Indies women's. It's very around the world. There's a lot of cricket happening all around the world, but to follow this series is just very exciting because of the nations and because of the context that they have and the history that they have amongst themselves in ODI cricket and the T20 format. But yes.
Yeah, mostly just that. I think with West Indies, they couldn't make it to the World Cup, so they have actually a lot of points to prove, and they will want to do well. And with Sri Lanka, we know that they have a lot of new players coming through the ranks. Of course, Atapattu is still their mainstay, but a lot of youngsters coming around, and they will hope that they can put on a good show. But this is mostly it from us today. Still waiting for cricket to resume. There's going to be semi-finals that are going to come our way very, very soon. But thanks for tuning in. Good morning once again. Hit that like button, share this with your friends, and subscribe. This is it from us. Peace.